Hi, my name is Mike Zuckerman, Chief Marketing Officer for Queplix, and I'm going to share part one of our webinar series, Thinking of Master Data Management, Don't Do It, Find Out Why. This video is available free and open access without registration. You can see the follow-on videos and much more by going to www.queplix.com and registering for white paper and video access. You can see others in the series here on virtual master data management, and there's just much more available through the registration site. Queplix is a data integration and data management company. We're leading the way with advanced data virtualization technology, which dramatically changes the difficulty and challenges associated with implementing any kind of business intelligence, data integration, data alignment amongst 3, 4, 5, 6 sources, right on through virtual master data management. This technology brings in all the right doses of data quality and data governance. It's well integrated and presents an environment where users can do all of this but do it without any SQL. One dashboard that provides an equal playing field for relational, object, XML, or even the new NoSQL data stores. And your users, your IT team, your business users, your financial people can see everything happening with these data integrations, data quality and governance, and not have to use any SQL or do any programming. It's a big change. Find out more about this. We also package this as one continuum, one product platform. It's not a set of disparate technologies collected over 10 or 20 years. It's one modern new deployment platform, and that's the nature of high technology. You know, things change. The market for data integration has gotten a little sleepy. People have been deploying ETL technology for 10, 20 years, and things have changed. We now offer technology that will dramatically reduce the cost of implementation, 2/3, 3/4 or more, and provide true data mobility. 99.9% of anything else you could acquire to do most of what I've described is going to be SQL and relational based, and this is now the old world, because the new world requires that you interact with things in the cloud. It requires that you interact with object-based applications. Salesforce.com is objects in the cloud. NetSuite growing in leaps and bounds in the cloud-based ERP deployment area. It's objects in the cloud, and these are now entering the large enterprise, and this changes your needs for how you're going to deploy and integrate your systems. Only Queplix is built from the ground up to address these new technologies and these integration requirements. So, master data management. What happened to the market? Where has it been and where is it going? Well, back in 2007, many of the industry analysts were projecting this market to be well over $5 billion by 2011, which is today. And in 2010, all of them started to recast their projections. Market projections ranged down more to $2 billion, $2.2 billion, and became far more cautious. And in fact, still project out 18 months to hit those numbers. So the projections fell far short. So what happened here? Well, what happened was a series of collisions. The first was the legacy technologies really have not been well positioned to address the cloud. Many large enterprises, for sure, have been adamant that cloud didn't meet their needs for security in many other areas, and we understand this. But nonetheless, technologies like Salesforce.com have been deployed and have now moved into a secure global deployment for major corporations and have become part of their infrastructure. But the MDM architectures do not address easily your ability to integrate and deploy cloud-based data synchronization and master data alignment. It's harder and it's difficult because everything inside your MDM system is architected for SQL and architected for relational technology, and that's not what's in Salesforce, and that's not what's in most of the new generation of cloud apps and all the other things that your advanced R&D teams are looking at, like NoSQL. So you have a collision between the legacy MDM tools. While the market was small and it took many years to evolve, fact is that these tools are now legacy tools and they don't address the XML and object worlds very well. That's just a fact. Number two, collision between complexity and expense and multi-year projects. I mean, here we are with the economy stressing most companies, and here's a project where there's extreme complexity, a lot of cross-organizational work required. significant expense wrapped around consulting and deployment, and gratification in terms of return on investment that's certainly not immediate. Most of these projects run multiple years, and most of these projects seem like they slip. I mean, every place I go, I find that the MDM projects are taking longer. Now, I'm overstating it perhaps, but not by much. MDM is very complex to deploy in the legacy paradigm and takes a long time. And in 2009, that was not a popular project to manage through an organization where budgets were under extreme stress. To make it worse was the collision with, a one-time event and manual process. For most of what you do in your IT team, whatever it is, you have people that have become your black belts. They know how to do it. They do it all the time. They've done it multiple times before. MDM, for most of the people in your organization, is not a repeat occurrence. It's not something they've done before. Someone, will go out and hire a project team, and I'll say, well, how are they qualified? Well, they implemented MDM over here, so they did it once over there. And we're not talking about something simple like, building out a new set of BI reports. This is the most complex integration you can do across an enterprise. It wraps around your entire enterprise. Most transaction systems that you'll do in a major enterprise are usually segregated to geographic entities or operating entities, but things like MDM even go beyond that in terms of scale. So the most complex event, yet it's a one-time event, and the only people that will claim to have experience in doing this maybe 2 times will be external consultants whose goal might be to maximize their consulting dollars at however many hundreds of dollars you pay them an hour, and hence the problem that we talked about with expense and everything else. So here you have a manual process, a one-time event, a higher risk event than most projects in IT or any place in the organization, and all of these things contributed to slowing down either the implementation or success that customers had. Finally, the paradigm here, and this is really key, for all of the big vendors out there, they're fine companies, but understand their business model. Their goals for the data integration and data management market are wrapped around professional services. They make their livings by selling hundreds and hundreds of hours to you every quarter for PS services. And the best boondoggle that money could buy for professional services forever wraps around the implementation of MDM. It is just a huge amount of professional services implementation, and that 80% manual process in meetings and studies and discussions about the common data model, and then coding ETL, and then testing and deployment. It just goes on and on and on, and it's because the technology set is not set up for any automation. The technology set is difficult and challenging to use, and to make it worse, the technology set has been built out in specialized areas that don't scale well, so you have to repeat it in a multiplicity of ways. Once you do product, it's different to do customer. You don't have one technology platform that easily supports different areas. And people will argue, well, you get return on investment. Look, return on investment in 6 months in a project in 2009 was a great thing. Return on investment, if you get to the end of the road in 2.5 years, in 2009 was not as great a thing. And so normal practices, became worse practices. And I think overall MDM is ready for change. Change is necessary, it's beneficial. We need to change the way we do this. We need to gather the benefits and return on investment that most customers have gathered from MDM. But we need to make it easier, we need to make it low risk, and we need to make it faster for them to reach these goals. So let's look at the current paradigm for how customers have tried to deploy. Let's look at the top areas that can impact these projects negatively. Let's look for solutions and alternatives. And we talk about thinking of MDM, don't do it, but the goal here is positive input and benefit for you, regardless of where you are in the process. That really what this is about is how to do it right. And we believe the architecture for doing it right is called virtual master data management. And we'll explore that a little bit in this series, but mostly in the follow-on series, so you can see different ways to solve your problems and become more successful with your implementation. Number one problem that just stands out everywhere is the boil the ocean syndrome, the Big Bang, the notion that this project is going to deploy across a global enterprise and we're going to just wrap it up with a bow and get it all done. Nothing could be further from the truth. Most of the legacy companies now know that this won't work. You know, if you look at history, history shows you the things that have failed and helps you understand not to make those mistakes again. And boy, the boil the ocean approach to master data management does not work. You're talking about cross-organizational boundaries in the largest companies, across divisions. You're talking about things that are not just about technology, they're about politics, they're about gaining consensus. They're about the most difficult skills you can imagine on a global scale across all of your major systems of records, depending upon what you're trying to do. Really, really hard, really, really high risk. I mean, that's what I think. What do you think? Budget and scope is indeterminate. I'm sure if someone did a study about how much would it cost to deploy MDM and really looked at it end to end, I don't think anyone got the estimate right. But you know, what do you think? I haven't been able to find it. This is an expensive, difficult, and challenging project, and when you do it globally, you know, you're asking for trouble unless you break it down into smaller, more well-defined pieces. So I think customers is an area of segmentation that's got high value to an organization, for marketing, for finance, for a million good reasons about the business strategy. Product catalogs are another area that have found a good return on investment. Your HR data is another area. And finally, vendor data is another one, depending on how many people you do business with. But you can go beyond this and you can say, well, in an SMB company or a $3 billion company, they may not want to call it master data management, but they've got 5 of these applications for which they need alignment between key customer data. And we run into a lot of projects like that. It's bigger than integrating 2 things, but it's not master data management. But boy, it sure looks like master data management on a much smaller scale, and that's where a lot of the market's going. Data integration is going beyond point to point. And so the Big Bang now can be sliced and diced into smaller pieces. But this is the key thing, right? Don't boil the ocean. Don't go after the Big Bang. And this is where, you know, many companies got themselves all tangled up over the last 5-10 years. Manual process is the next big challenge. If you look at all the vendor data, you know, I have all of these market studies from all these industry analysts that are very wise people, and they make their living off of consulting in this area. And you look at the market definitions, there are related markets they size called the integration services for MDM, and then the professional services components. And then depending on how they define their market, right, depending on the analyst, what you really do when you do the math is you find that this market is about 75% or more about professional services, and I actually think the number's a lot higher said and done. I'm erring on the side of what I think is conservatism, but it's my point of view. 75% or more is PS services. Boy, that's manual process. That is, you know, a very heavy component, and it's everywhere. It's in organizational alignment, it's in master data object definition, it's in metadata management, it's in tying together a bunch of disparate systems, it's in coding a ton of ETL links. You've got to have architects and people that can think about the data organization and semantic content across multiple and disparate systems. That's really tough stuff. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of automation in the legacy processes to make this work. Then you've got other issues to think about that tie to this. The core to master data management is wrapped around data governance. Master data management is about data governance, and data governance ties to compliance, and none of this works without a deep philosophy for the importance of things like data quality and how you're going to deploy it. And these issues are all treated separately by most technologies, and in some cases are necessarily wrapped in manual process. So all of this is manual process top to bottom, and it makes it really hard, makes it very unpredictable, and makes it expensive. right? You need to think the way Tivoli thought years ago, which was the notion that you could give one view to your entire network, right? And that was sort of the Tivoli promise years and years ago. And virtual master data management brings that promise full circle. It starts to let you see all of this as an automated process where you can see all of these pieces in one place. And certainly there are organizational alignments and other issues that will remain political processes, but much of these disparate things that need to get done can now be brought into one automated technology circle, which will reduce your cost and increase your chances of success. Data discovery is sort of the first piece of, how do you unwind this giant ball of string and get to what's in the center. Today it's a process of emails and meetings. You have to meet with key people. You have to understand this for every key enterprise app. What is the structure of the data? What's in every field? What is the name of the field? And what is the semantic content? What are our standard business definitions? Because everybody in every system gives me slightly different names for these fields, but when do they mean the same thing? Because when this is the customer address of record in system A, and it's the customer address of record in system B, and the definition of customer address of record is this, then I can start to think about moving data and synchronizing it between the two systems, or extracting the best components and moving them to my data warehouse so I can do more with them. And that's what data discovery has to power. You're swamped in spreadsheets and emails and meetings, and then separate and disparate tools that in some cases do, in some cases don't, tie to the MDM software products. Virtual MDM presents an integrated environment to tie all of this together and automates data discovery. All you need are the securities and the permissions to speak to a data source, and the system automatically exposes the structure of the data, whether it's relational, object, XML, or even new NoSQL data stores, and lets you see the structure, brings it into the system, and then immediately it's inside a data dictionary that you can start to expand and document and make visible to your integration teams. IEEE did a seminal study and has shown that 43% of the time for data integration is wrapped around just understanding what's in your data sources and understanding the semantic content and making sense of it all. I can tell you that at its core, master data management is a data integration exercise. It starts out with data governance and all the important things you know, but when the sleeves are rolled up, it's about a lot of very gritty data integration, and the smart people you have on your ETL teams are shackled by 10 to 20-year-old technology, have to figure this stuff out the hard way, and then have to go hand-code it in these ETL links. And that's where the rubber hits the road, and these are the kinds of things that you can substantially reduce using technologies like virtual master data management. Fourth, the current paradigm for MDM is so complex. The hub architectures that people deploy are really not well designed to be multi-tier. They tend to be flat. They tend to show a hub and spoke as if this is going to scale well for most enterprise. Well, these architectures are generally designed for large firms, but not the very largest firms, because when they scale up, what I hear is, well, we had to do one MDM implementation in Europe, one MDM implementation in the US, or we had to segment it by product divisions because it really wouldn't scale further. And then at a higher level, we're trying to piece components together from these different systems. So the reality is that when it comes to scaling multi-points of integration, multiple MDM hubs, the reality is that the customers have to code this themselves using, of course, their professional services contractors that are more than happy to do this endlessly. And so you need to think about how many application systems of record really need to get to this data, and to get full benefits, you've got to synchronize back and forth. So we'll talk about that. All the transforms that have to be coded are done 99.9% of the time inside of things called ETL, and it is black box technology. It's coded by very smart people. It's very old stuff, and it's all done in SQL mostly, and it's just, no matter what you think is happening because of the metadata that you've got in your MDM system, When the day is done, ETL links are coded individually, and when you want to know what's going on inside one, you've got to open it up and look. They're all pipes, and you've got to run a pipe from point A to point B. And the fact is, when you have a ring or a hub, it just means that you have to move the stuff around in the middle. These architectures are very manual in terms of implementation, and they're point to point. So this is very complex, and it's global, and it's mostly relational, and then you've got to cobble in things like your object technologies. Even worse is that you've got to wrap yourselves around the API of many proprietary products. Yes, they're relational, but you can't do inserts and updates to some applications like SAP and others. And of course, if you buy their hub, you're going to have ease of access. But what about all your other vendors? So now you have vendor APIs that you have to wrap to that are more object-like most of the time than anything else to access the underlying relational data. And how are you going to do all this? This is the kind of problem that VMDM solves very elegantly, and this is the kind of problem that current legacy architectures require heavy lifting to solve. Complexity, difficult deployment, and the architectural solutions out there really don't scale down to the mid-tier companies, nor do they really scale to the largest global enterprise easily without a lot of manual implementation and a lot of customization. This complexity can really slow you down a lot, and this is the kind of thing that virtual MDM tries to solve for you and get past. And you'll see that virtual MDM will simplify a lot of this because of how the architecture is structured. Now we look at the current MDM paradigm, and we look at the notion of, I call it the common data model, the fact that there is one point where somewhere you've got the master data records for customers or products or something else, and it could be a set of data, it could be virtual, it could be merely a bunch of transformations where the original data lives in multiple places, and you never hold that common data, but you know how to create it or move things to or from that form so that other source systems can use it. There's a lot of philosophy here, but fundamentally you've got to decide what that common data set is and how it's going to look, and this creates tremendous internal political barriers. This is very serious work. For vendors, it's a life and death battle. I've heard the words in some accounts, we've decided to use SAP's data model. That's a life and death model. Think about the different places that your vendors are fighting for key architectural footprints. ERP systems for many large companies, key battlefield of deployment. CRM system, key battlefield of deployment. Data warehouse, key battlefield of deployment. And now MDM. I mean, if you control the MDM architecture, you have a seat right between the CIO and the CFO on the executive management team, because you are so close to the daily operations of that company, and your software is so integrated by so much custom integration work and manual process that you will be there forever. And so this becomes a very, very difficult process. So what is the transform that takes the data in my system on customers and turns it into this more pure form of data that the organization feels is appropriate, or perhaps none of the source data comes from me, perhaps I just bring it into my system of record. How does all that work, and what are the standards? This is a very difficult part of the process, and understanding that common data model and how you're going to build it often becomes, in some cases, an insurmountable barrier. I have met with organizations that have been unable to resolve these issues and have never been able to implement MDM. I walked into one large accounting firm in Chicago, and they told me that 2 years ago they tried to implement, they had a free product from one of the largest software vendors in the world. They gave it to them for free to implement, but they were unable to resolve the organizational issues to get this done. So there you go. Data synchronization. This is the area where a lot of systems fall short, where project managers deep in the throes of battle in year 2 have figured out that the only victory they're going to claim is going to be limited, and it's not going to include synchronization. Let's be real here. The lack of of near-time or real-time synchronization between the master data and your systems of record, the lack of this synchronization is perceived as failure to deliver value proposition by all the non-IT personnel, the senior executives that got anywhere near this project or heard about it. The goal here was that you would build out your best data sets, you'd have the best knowledge of who that customer is, and then you would propagate that back into all your systems so that you could gather the return on investment. This is hard to do. Many people just figure out how to extract master data one way, but it's a two-way process. That's what it has to be, and respectfully submitted, it just isn't happening very easily or at all for some customers. This is an area where virtual master data management will just save you a ton of work, because once you set this up, the notion of synchronization, or what we call data harmonization, becomes automated and easy. We've talked about the conflict between relational, XML, the cloud, the new NoSQL stores. Some of these problems have been solved by some architectures, but fundamentally the paradigm from the big vendors that you will talk to today was not built to address the cloud, was not built to address the world of XML, was not built to address the world of NoSQL. You're putting adapters on connectors, and it slows you down. It's not the right way to do things. The deployment model for the new world is about object-oriented technology, and that's what you should be using, and that will make your cloud integration much, much easier. Scalability is an issue where the current deployment models, I think, have slowed down with the largest enterprise and have failed with the mid-tier market. So you have a model here which is about 80% professional services. It's complex, it's difficult, and a mid-tier firm comes along and says, well, do I need master data management? I really want my CRM system, my ERP system, and a couple other applications to share common customer data and to align that data. Is this MDM? Is this what I need? And so your legacy vendors come in and say, sure, this is what you need. We'll give you a hub, we'll do this, we'll do that. And when you get done, it's 700,000, 800,000, 1.5 million, 1.8 million. I mean, the numbers to do these projects are huge. And it just doesn't make any sense for a mid-tier company, or most companies that are a few billion in revenue or less. And there's a lot of companies out there that fit those parameters. And it's the manual process. You need a different kind of architecture that will get you most of the return on investment, but without all of the manual process and all of the difficulty that goes with it. Virtual MDM will scale wonderfully down and solve the problems for a multi-point integration alignment for a $50 million firm that has a lot of customers and has a lot of prospects and needs good alignment of data. It's almost on the side of just, I want to do a data integration. I want my data sources to have the same data, and they won't use the words master data management. We know what it is when we see it, but the current paradigm will kill the benefits that this customer wants to harvest. On the very high end, the current hub and ring structures will not scale for the very largest global enterprise. You have to use multiple instances of them, and then it's up to you to tie it together. And boy, are we talking about consulting and manual data movement and new processes for IT people to follow forever to get this stuff to work, let alone, we'll get to things like disaster recovery. So the current model, I think, probably fits customers that are into the many billions of dollars in revenue, where despite all the difficulty in manual process, they can get good return on investment. I don't think it scales at all to the mid-tier. I think the notion that the current products by price reduction will work well in the mid-tier is flawed. I think the worst thing an SMB company could do is deploy a legacy MDM architecture. And to me, it means if you're a few billion or less, you should be looking at virtual master data management or just some well-managed data integrations to get you 90% of the return on investment. And that can come with the data governance and data quality you need. You probably certainly don't need legacy MDM, in my humble opinion. And you'll have to explore these things and understand them for yourselves, and then figure out what's comfortable for your organization. But current technology, I don't think, will scale the right way. It's really built to fit, and when you want to integrate to more apps, you've got to build out all the links yourself to go beyond that initial ring architecture. It's just a lot of work to do. Maintenance is the one area where you think, in the midst of all this, well, IT is really good about understanding life cycle cost, and that's true. IT people, they've been through this 50 times for any vendor, for any project. But when you look at the size of this implementation, how on earth are you really going to test and stage a multi-point integration like this easily? I mean, you're talking about an integration to every system of record and then data moving back and forth. So think about it this way. At the end of the quarter, your CFO wants to know exactly what was in that system of record, in that division, in that business unit. And now you've got something that's going to tie all these pieces of data together. And, well, it's not transactional. It's not, specific financial transactions about this or that. Okay, fine. But you're talking about core data for customers or vendors, and you're going to create system interfaces that move things between different systems and change that data of record in those source systems. How are you going to test and deploy that properly? Well, it's really, really hard and really, really difficult. How are you going to make sure that you have disaster recovery in place later on to bring this all back to life? What are you going to do if you propagate bad data through your system? I've got a data integration. Let's just take 5 systems, and I'm propagating customer information. So I have a new record for Tom Jones. Tom Jones has changed his address. Tom Jones changed his address, and I put it into my CRM system, and now I want to propagate it through other systems. Maybe it's a patient billing system if you're doing medical informatics, whatever it is, your ERP system. And guess what? Somehow I've brought in bad data about Tom, and I've propagated that through 5 systems. How are you going to audit this, understand it happened? How are you going to roll it back? Ask those questions of your vendors. Most of the time you get blank stares because you've implemented the ETL links that make all this go. And the only way to roll anything back probably is to try to stuff some new data in the top of one of the systems and transform it through. It's really hard to difficult to impossible. Virtual Master Data Management has an architecture that allows you to see the lineage of all the transforms you have, and in one mode will allow you to also maintain an audit trail to the transformed data, both the transforms and the data itself, depending on your environment, the compliance that you need, and what goes with the storage of that data. But those are the kinds of things that you can do. You can go back, find transactions, reverse them. 99% of the legacy MDM does not really do that. You've hand-coded ETL links and you're on your own. And trust me, you're going to end up with 5, 10, 15, 20. Over time, many systems network together, passing data between them. How are you going to make sense of that? How are you going to maintain it? How are you going to fix it when it goes bad? How are you going to roll it back? How is it going to be auditable and compliant? My belief is that most of the current architectures are not well suited to do that. And for the large enterprises that have been successful with these legacy technologies, it's because of the strength and stamina of their IT teams and the intellectual capability of the people that run these systems, but it's not because the systems have made it easy for them. So a lot of challenges with current MDM architecture. We believe there's a better way. It's called Virtual Master Data Management. Come to our site, register, and see the instant video, a webinar on virtual MDM, understand how to pilot the technology, and see many more videos that explain what data virtualization is, and share more about our company's products and technologies. We also talk about return on investment and value proposition, so come see the video on that series. That will also help you build out your business decision and understand the value prop for you and your organization. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Speak with you soon. Bye-bye.